Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next in the Q Connector Podcast Series, brought to you by Qarbon Technologies. We're very happy that you've all been able to join us here today, and appreciate you making the time, as always, in your busy schedules. There's been a bit of a gap in the Qarbon Connector podcast from last year. We're going to try and stick and be more rigorous in the scheduling this year. So many guests and so many potential discussions to have around the sector. So we still aggressively hope to do them monthly, worst case once a quarter. So keep an eye out for future episodes. We're going to be with you here today for just under an hour. We're going to try and keep it quite snappy and focus in on the content that we feel will be most valuable and interesting to all of you. Please do ask your questions. We've got a team ready to review, and feel free to either put your name directly or ask them anonymously as you feel best. So with that, I think I'd like to start by introducing our guest to start with, and also let him speak a little bit more about himself. Very happy that Marcello Brescia from HGC Global Communications, live from Hong Kong, is able to join us today. And Marcello is also a very good friend. And for those within the data center, cloud and networking and telco sectors, a very well-known and recommended name across the industry. So Marcello, thank you very much for joining us. If I could maybe ask you to first introduce and speak a little bit about yourself and your background, just so the viewers get a feel of who you are and where you're joining us from.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Omer, and thanks for having me for the second episode of this interesting podcast driven by Qarbon Technologies. Hi, everyone. My name is Marcello, and I'm based in Hong Kong. I work for HGC Global Communications, and I'm in the telecom industry for the last 4 years almost. And prior to that, I was more involved into data center side. So it's quite interesting. I witnessed the rise of the cloud and also the experience of the COVID-19, where we had a surge on the usage of bandwidth and digital infrastructure, raised up quite quickly with a huge amount of investment. And very pleased to join the webinar today, and look forward to this discussion. Thank you, Homer.
Thanks, Marcello. Great to have you with us. Robert, for some of the newer viewers, maybe a bit of background on yourself, your role at Qarbon, and to give them a bit of a flavor of Robert Davidson.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Omer. For those of you that don't already know me, my name is Robert Davidson. So my career took sort of an inverted path to Marcello. I started off in the telecommunication space for about 18, 20 years there, and then went to the data center side. So I saw it from the flip side, from the consumption of data centers into the data center space. And then it led me to then go out and start Qarbon Technologies, which looks to try to stitch together the things that the consumption layer is looking for from the data center space, and making it easier to consume data centers as a whole and manage those footprints, which is one of the reasons why we like working with companies like HGC, who are forward-thinking, customer-focused, and really looking at improving the customer experience as a core way of achieving success in the marketplace. That's sort of the perfect combination for what we seek to work with in the future. So you'll hear bits and pieces about what Qarbon is doing, but really more about how we see the market as opposed to how we're fitting into it. But you'll obviously see some of the pain points that I see, and we'll look to solve. So thank you. Omer,
excellent.
Back to you.
Thanks, Robert. Much appreciated. And as Robert said, I think with the Connector podcast, as we did with the kickoff, really, the aim here is to give insights from the industry. Hence why we're very fortunate to have Marcello here with us. And we'll be doing that, as I said, throughout the year with different parts of the ecosystem, really trying to focus in on what is becoming more and more critical infrastructure layer, data centers, and the surrounding layers to that, be it network, telco. We started with obviously the research from structured research, but then you'll see other organizations come on with regard to that as well. So without further ado, I want to start with our first question and topic, and we'll keep this quite open. And as I said, for all the attendees, please feel free to type in your questions at any point throughout, and we're going to try and leave a good, healthy 10 to 15 minutes at the end to address questions. But Marcello, I want to start with you, if that's okay, and really start focusing a little bit on the trends that are driving the cloud, content, gaming players within Asia Pacific. I think will be very interesting because that's going to give an insight from your own world. What are you seeing? What are some of the trends driving their current growth, and how do you see that developing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so maybe just to give a bit more background about HGC to the audience, Omer. HGC is a network service provider based in APAC. Our HQ is in Hong Kong, but actually we have a network based all over Asia Pacific, and we are owned by the Miami-based private equity firm called I Square Capital, which they own a number of digital infrastructure assets around the globe. So our coverage is mostly APAC, as you can see on the screen that you just shared. Thank you for that. And we help customers to expand their footprint in the Asia Pacific, starting with the colocation data center when they need to install the racks in order to reach the eyeballs. As everyone knows, the Asia Pacific is home to the youngest and maybe highest population. And we have more than 1 billion of users, counting China as well, internet users, which in our industry are called eyeballs, right? The consumers of the content that we provide across our networks, and that they are sitting in all data centers, actually globally. So we provide a range of services to satisfy these kind of business cases, providing connectivity like DC to DC for cloud, and then connectivity to the public cloud. And interesting is that HGC also manages the M6, which is the internet exchange that from Amsterdam then expanded overseas and is now present in Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, Manila in the Philippines anytime soon, and also the US. So as you can see on the map, the red dots are mostly in the Asia Pacific, because you asked about what is driving the consume of this kind of services. Well, in Asia, the hubs are well known as Hong Kong and Singapore. I would say Japan as well, with Tokyo, subsea cables landing from the west coast of the United States. And what is driving the demand of the services that are shared on the screen is the new technologies that they need to be addressed and reach the eyeballs, which are again the internet users in the markets like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, which have this kind of eyeballs that have a demand to consume this kind of content. On top of that, during the past months, I would say even last couple of years, we have had the surge of AI, okay, which is impacting on the data centers, both on the infrastructure side and also on the network side. Because on the, as you know, on the data center side, we have demand of more power to house these GPUs, and they demand better cooling as well. So it's always an ever-growing demand of improving the infrastructure. And it's interesting in Asia Pacific because compared to US or Europe, the landscape of the regulations and in the infrastructure itself can be very different country by country. So as I said before, Hong Kong and Singapore are the hubs because they are like the peeling points of the internet. right? So from here and Singapore, and it's where the gaming customers or the cloud content providers, they reach the users and also the enterprise businesses based in other countries as well of the region. So interesting is also that this content that we consume every day, right? It travels across subsea cables. So if you are in the industry, recently you have learned about the unfortunate Red Sea cables cut, which was across all the news, and that has an impact on the industry. Okay, because some of the traffic coming from Europe that travels to Asia has to be diverted. So us as HGC, we managed to divert this traffic both on the west side through US and also through the east, finding alternative routes. And then the end point is always the data centers, and then subsequently the users as well. And then not sure if you're familiar, but before we were talking about also the metaverse, right? Where we're seeing these immersive gaming experiences. And one of the trend that now is raising up, I was learning last week during GTC, which is the AI conference hosted by NVIDIA, is that now we talk about text to gaming generation. So before, to generate a game, you need the army of coding experts, right? But now there is like Google launched Genie. I'm not sure if the pronunciation is correct, but essentially is how AI impacts the gaming generation is tremendous, because now anyone with the text, you can create a gaming and a game, and it's amazing how we are leapfrogging the infrastructure in this sense.
Just to confirm that, Marcello. So what you're saying is literally they type out, which is quite scary actually, but they type out what they want to see in the game, and then the platform develops it and produces the graphics, the gameplay, everything, right? That's what that's pretty much what it is, which is incredible.
It's incredible, but it's scary at the same time. Because I think there have been talks in the industry as well, which AI can be used for good things, but it can be also used for bad things, so we need to be careful about that. I was in San Francisco last week, and I was scared to see the driverless cars. Like we were in the traffic, I was driving, and you see these cars stop next to you, and this driverless car with no driver, and it's scary in a way, because as much as it can be programmed to bringing a passenger from one place to another, it can even be if someone has a bad intention, especially in the world we live today. It's scary.
It's a lot of areas, but the automation and AI, let's hold on to that thought, because that's the follow-up questions I want to go to. But anything more on the growth of the gaming content and sort of the cloud sectors as you see it, to continue your thoughts there?
Absolutely. And then of course we are looking forward to partner with companies like Qarbon, because they bring innovation, and behind, now we talk about only what's outside, but it's also good to behind the scene, what's happening behind. There is a lot of infrastructure involved. There is a lot of to allow all these technologies being used by the users. Okay, we need to think that there are a lot of implications and a lot of different parties involved in this process. So we have data centers, even the cooling guys. We have the network service providers like us, that sometimes they are felt as competitors, but ultimately when we have a requirement by a customer that there's a solid B case to go in a new market, it's amazing to see how this process behind the scenes are managed. And we hope that with the Qarbon we can improve that in order to facilitate the processes and bring to speed these kind of amazing technologies coming online.
Excellent. Well, that's a phenomenal intro and a good little teaser to the AI development, as I'm sure people are expecting us to land on in terms of topic. But Marcello, thank you so much for the intro and setting the scene. Robert, I'm going to hand over to you again. Similar, really, question. I guess you can come from a different angle, given your role and also your background. But what do you see as the trends driving exactly the same sectors? So the content, the gaming, and the cloud giants. And from Asia, maybe you want to also take a sort of a global view to that as well.
Well, Omer, if you could throw up my slides, and that'll sort of help me set the stage for a little bit. So we're, of course, seeing massive growth, and really we're seeing the industry at one of those points where it's going to turn on a fulcrum. So there's a few events that happen, when the internet comes out, when Bitcoin gets released, and now when we start to see AI take off, that really change everything you do and think about the way that the market looks. So these changes to gaming, to AI needs in general, really have helped exacerbate something that I've seen over the last 20 years. If we were talking 20 years ago, we would be talking about, to support all of these services, you would build a data center. A data center was a thing, an atomic entity that any service that you needed to house or interconnect would be in the data center. That world is gone. We are now at a point where I would argue there are 13 types of data centers, 13 use cases that are being deployed to satisfy these various different market segments. And AI just being the newer ones. Quite honestly, if you had spoken to me a year ago, this would have 10 blocks on it. Now it has 13 because we've seen AI really change the sorts of data centers that we need. And the reason I bring that up is because if you're building a location for a legacy telco application, it'll have a low density, large floor plan, and that is going to be purpose unfit for the current AI needs. So we're really seeing a dramatic shift in what's driving how we need to build and how we need to supply services. So effectively, what we're seeing is AI is going to create an environment where you're going to need high dense, possibly liquid-cooled solutions with high amounts of capacity brought in to feed out in a purely optical fashion. The days of copper, the days of low density, probably long gone. The world of a fully generated environment that is AI from the ground up, purpose built for the environment. We're also seeing, or what I'm starting to see in my space, is the automation journey that has started to take over in the network space. And quite honestly, I've spent time with Hutchison, and they're a leader in some of that, in the way that they've gotten things to work from an automation perspective. We're now starting to see those same challenges get faced in the data center space, which is what's creating the need for, and really the genesis of, what we internally refer to as the software programmable data center. If you think about a data center today and how you interoperate with it, you're probably thinking about a team of people that are manually constructing services, manually placing orders, and working tickets. In a world where AI is the first out of the gate, you want not only your AI solutions to be housed in a data center, but those same sort of AI components to be able to control the environments that they're in. And to do that, that requires a very different management structure, one that's API first, where data is available and really plugged in. And again, sort of the term we like to toy with there is a software programmable data center, where the data center is not a external piece of real estate, but an integral part of the IT stack that sort of comprises another layer of the full service suite that you're looking to offer, and really needs to be plugged into your overall management structure. Because let's face it, if there's a critical issue that happens in a data center, that is something that's going to take down multiple layers of services, and you need to be able to respond to that in hours, minutes, maybe even seconds as AI starts to take over. So that's sort of where I see and what I see it driving, especially in the data center space. Thank you, Omer.
Thanks, Robert. And Marcello, does that resonate with you as HGC? Do you see the data center itself evolving? And from your interactions from a HGC perspective and your own infrastructure as well?
Yeah, absolutely. As Robert said, a few years ago, maybe the data center was seen just as a switching center, right? Carrier hotel, and then evolved with the cloud coming online, right? So that changed the whole landscape. And from our view, nowadays, as I shared before, we have customer cases that they need to connect to the cloud zone because they consume cloud. At the same time, they also need to have a network that reach the users as well. So the data centers, as Robert said as well, is not only merely real estate infrastructure, a real estate asset. Whatever is residing inside that, it's very valuable for the digital infrastructure landscape, and you can say now is the economy, right? We say now for a number of years we are moving from oil and the traditional economies to a digital infrastructure economy where data is very valuable and is continuously optimizing the processes of businesses to save OPEX and optimize their processes to run the business more efficiently, right? So cloud is of course the main driving of this, but if we dive into the operations as well, AI can be a huge change and shift that maybe earlier we only had with the internet, and perhaps with the cloud, that's the thing. That's why companies like Qarbon, we hope to work together to enable that.
Excellent. Thanks, Marcello. So to tee up the next section, which won't come as a surprise to everybody, but we're going to dive deeper into AI. It's a bit difficult to do any call today, and I wouldn't necessarily coin that as a data center or technology. I think any call in any sector at some stage will reference AI. I think given the current wave, and I just wanted to pull up a few from the Stanford University AI Institute, which is phenomenal and something we do track closely. But that'll give you a feel there. Number of AI patent filings, really, and this is, as you'll see, 2 or 3 years old. This is from their 2022 AI index report. A massive leap at the sort of post-COVID stage around AI patents really going up in the world. And I don't know how many of you would have seen it, but again, I'm going to tie it back to our discussion around really the infrastructure driving it. But Amazon recently came out and really coined the phrase that everybody will have an assistant, but an actual AI-driven avatar assistant within the next few years. So it's clear that the AI boom is developing and encompassing us all. Marcello, I'd like to seek your help for this call, just to bring it back to relevance, I guess, to our areas. So specifically for those on the call again, which are really a cross spread of the ecosystem, let's call it, of the people driving the infrastructure that AI needs to breathe and live. How do you see it from a HG perspective? So you mentioned some of the gaming, really interesting gaming implications, but specifically from HGC in Asia, if we came with the question, how is AI driving what you're doing, and how is AI maybe changing some of the assumptions or ways of working that you had previously? That would be, I think, very interesting for the audience.
Yeah, sure. I think there are two elements to talk about this. One is about, as briefly discussed earlier, about the processes, right? So whether AI can help to provision the telecom service. So whoever is on this webinar and is not familiar with that, but every time a customer provision a telecom service, there are a number of processes to follow and to enable that the service is up, right? So if there is a software that will speed up that, if there is a process relying on AI to do that, it would be a tremendous impact and run efficiency both on the provider side, like HGC, but also on the customer side, and also on the data center side. Because us as HGC, we rent colocation, we buy colocation space from data center operators. So that could be a very solid and good use case for the industry. And on the other side, as shared earlier, whether the content that for example, we work with the gaming customers as well, that they need to have lowest latency, the shortest path to reach the gamers in these emerging markets like Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, and so on and so forth, Philippines. And whether AI is going to bring in the entertainment industry a role of speeding up the process of creating this content. And we need to be ready as industry to serve this, because actually I would like to quote an artist, if you allow me, Homer, to do so. You're familiar with Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol
Yes.
used to say, in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes, right?
Yes.
Because the moment we progress in our lives, right? Before a phenomenon is that if I'm in the entertainment industry, last like 10 years, 20 years, or even nowadays, we listen to content, we watch a movie that, The Godfather, right? For example, is a movie that is there for, 40 years, right? But when now we evolve in that sense, the content, the social media, all these kind of content is consumed by the by the users. It only lasts for a handful of minutes, right? We have Instagram, we have the Reels, and we have that content that only lasts few seconds, right? So that should correspond on the infrastructure layer as well, a fast provisioning and also a fast deployment of that kind of infrastructure. So in the industry, for example, there is a term of burstable internet. When there is some gaming tournaments, right, we are able to provide an internet that bursts the traffic, and then in the evening, when people don't play games or when they're working, hopefully they are not playing games at work, they're able to the network goes down, right? So the infrastructure must always reflect what's on the other side, which is on the content side as well. And it's amazing because it's always challenging, but we hope that AI can always bring up to speed the content to the users as well. Yeah.
Excellent, Marcello. Yeah, really, really good perspectives as well, I think, to bring it home to people as well. So thank you for that. Robert, similar vein, really. How is AI changing the landscape from your perspective, given what you're seeing more from obviously DC operators, but also companies like HGC and the different companies from a carbon hat you're working with from an infrastructure layer, and obviously given your background in networking and network provisioning, both sides I think will be interesting for the listeners to hear how you're seeing this AI tsunami, let's call it, brush over all of the industry, and how is that changing people's approaches?
Yeah, well, there's a few good nuggets in here. And just to follow on with one of the very interesting things that Marcello was talking about from a deployment perspective, we're all in an interconnected ecosystem. As you can well see, one of the challenges that I always faced at CenturyLink when I was running that environment was that something as simple as a cross connect would take on average 3 to 4 hours to place because of all the data you needed to swivel chair and get into various systems. In an AI world that's focused on automation, that's a human being getting in between, getting in the way. We need to get into a world where that can be interconnected so that the AI or the systems that you've done your automation in can actually place that order in seconds, not hours. So in that just one instance, if you look at a company, a moderate sized telecommunications provider that may be placing 100, 200 cross-connect orders a month, might be ordering 3, 4, 5, 10 racks a month, you might be consuming full-time jobs of 2, 3, 4 individuals just on order placement and order disconnect alone for things where you have all the information in one system, you just need to get it to another system that is controlled by a third party, and you have no way to do that other than human beings dumping data onto the floor and rekeying it into another set of systems. So to me, I think it's almost table stakes for AI really to make an impact in automation and taking control of some of the more simplistic tasks in our environments. We need to have a fabric that connects it all together. I will admit I am working on one such fabric to create that and help solve that problem. But that's just one example of something that's there. Now, when we take a look at AI in general, on the data center side, I see it creating two major impacts. So one, it's stressing the tolerances of the data centers that we're building. So if you were building a data center that you could air cool because it was on average 5 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt per rack, no problem. AI is now driving us to 20, 30, 40 kilowatt per rack environments, and we're stretching into liquid cooled. That requires us to be able to monitor and react to situations on a much faster clip than we have traditionally. And effectively, you want to be in a situation where you can react to changes in those environments, not in hours or next business day, as we commonly see in the marketplace, but in hours, minutes, maybe even seconds with your automated tools to be able to make adjustments, which may be something as simple as spinning down loads, moving loads, or actually creating an environment where you're changing operating parameters because of a change in the overall environment. So these are the sorts of things that we need to be able to enable for that to grow and really take over and really come to its full fruition. So, and then, of course, the second area that we see AI is that not only is it affecting the data centers as a whole as to how we need to manage and maintain them, but also, we start to see AI coming into play as, can we make better decisions about how we would design data centers? Or can we learn about environments and actually have AI start to help us decide how those environments should be better managed that are already deployed? One example that I may use is, I had this long discussion in Singapore a few months back with an ESG company that's focused on, how do we create a world where data centers aren't the biggest consumer, or we manage the consumption of energy better. Well, the way that you do that may be to have an AI system that's able to monitor and see all of the environments that you have spread around a region. And possibly if one site is getting too hot, one site might have a better cost point or be able to use more green energy, where you could dynamically move that load. One of the things that we still see in the market today is it's very static when we talk about energy consumption in these areas. So in the years that I spent in telecom and in the data center space, you would lay out a framework for how you were going to consume energy. It might be 20% green, 80% traditional fossil fuels, and that's how you ran forward. What about a world where you had an AI engine with access directly to the consumption data, and you would be able to move things around? If you started to see more green energy available in a different location, you'd be able to dynamically move loads, maybe within a week, maybe within a month, to that location, and then potentially move it back. We think about loads in these environments as static, but they're not really as static as you think. They're static because we've always had to treat them as static, but there's no reason we couldn't be spinning up and spinning down workloads based on energy consumption criteria. We just need the intelligence to be able to do that. And that's what I think is really starting to come as AI starts to move into the space. Not as a deployed into the data center space in the example, but as a way to better manage the workloads that we have in a disparate section of data centers in a regional or around the world. Not everything needs real-time local services. Some can be moved, and you just need to have the ability and capability to move it dynamically.
Thanks, Robert. Really makes a lot of sense. So I want to move now. We've had a lot of great questions, so I'm going to leave a little bit longer at the end for the questions. So my final question, direct topic, and I'm actually going to share something on the screen. So I'm going to start with you, Robert, this time rather than Marcello, and end with Marcello if that's okay. But I'm going to tie it to this slide, and you know, a lot of the attendees we have today are from across the data center network and telco ecosystem, so that I'm sure without a doubt they would have read around various outages across the world. But the most recent one was in Singapore, which hit a few large banks. Those in Singapore probably recall. But Robert, tied to this, and you can obviously speak to that incident and how, you know, potential preventative measures across the industry, not specific to that DC provider by any means. I think this is an issue for everybody in the industry. But I want to tie it to the last topic, which is around an API-enabled automation and how, you know, that is now starting to hit data centers and the network sector. Tied to everything we discussed earlier with Marcello and yourself around AI happening and how that tied to this event specifically, and the importance of truly API-enabled automation as we move forward. And then Marcello, I'll come from your view on that same question, but more from a network and telco perspective.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, Omer. And this is probably a good example that's very related to what I was talking about in the API in the AI space, specifically because this is a real-world example of a data center outage that impacted a market. In October, as everyone knows, there was a major outage that took down a number of major financial institutions, as well as many connectivity customers. So now, the knee-jerk reaction that everyone had was that, oh my, we need to spend more money on resilience and redundancy. We need to throw money at this problem across every data center. And I think that's the wrong response. And I say that for a very specific reason. Now, of course, I come from the operator space, in that if you dissect the outage, a human being did a bad thing and broke something they shouldn't have. Human beings do stupid things sometimes. That'll never stop. That will always be a situation. It's not, can we pay money around that problem? It's how do we react to the problem? And I mention that because I interviewed a number of people who were impacted by that. And what the reality is that they all told me basically the same thing, is that they could move workloads and they could resolve resiliency problems in under 2 hours. But this outage took 5 hours to transpire. So the situation happened, notifications tried to get out to the right people, and the issue happened 5 hours later. So if you think about it, well, what didn't happen operationally that caused these 3 hours to be wasted? So, Omer, if you could flip to the next slide, I think that may illustrate a little bit better the scenario. So if you think about it, what occurred there on the left is that the data center operator in this question did the right things. They attempted to call, page, post, generally email people to let them know what was going on, but it's a Saturday, it's off hours. The information didn't get to the right people in the right way. People aren't staring at 40, 50, 100 different web portals all the time looking for notifications. So that automation didn't exist, because it required human interaction as a gateway between the information about the incident and the consumption platform. And I use ServiceNow as an example here, but there's many different, trouble ticketing consumption platforms that could be in place. But human beings were needed to do something about it. The world that we want to be in, that we need to be in the AI space especially, is we need to have that notification, that information passed directly into the consumption system. So the world that I see is that what would have fixed the problem is not throwing an extra $20 million at every data center in Singapore, but connecting people, their trouble ticketing system, their operations platforms into those notification windows, so that if something like this happens, you're not relying on human beings to do the right thing on an off day and an off hour, but an informational ticket opens up in that trouble ticketing system, and the operations center immediately knows that there's something needed to respond to, and potentially trigger their restoral process. Again, everyone I spoke to said that 2 hours is what they need to do resumption, but they didn't activate it in time because they didn't know enough to be able to activate it in time. That's not a money problem. That is an operation and API connectivity problem. If the right information had been in the right spot, I believe that the outage, the actual impact, would not have occurred. So, and of course, from my standpoint, the reason that I like working with companies like Hutchison is I've gotten to see how they've actually deployed automation, working automation in many key ways. So they've got the framework in place to really sort of plug in some of these extra capabilities and features. So it's not convincing someone to take that journey. They've already started and they've already got it working. Not a common thing in the marketplace today.
That's probably a great. Thanks, Robert, as always. And that's a great handover, Marcello. Maybe if you want to speak to general automation trends as AI is impacting, but also feel free to bring it to specifically how HGC is automating the network.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think especially for the people that they are not into the industry that deep, right? As Robert said, there is a lot of manual work behind. So now we mentioned here some unfortunate accident, right? That caused a business to go down, in this case, financial institution, which is unfortunate, right? But even in the face of deploying a network or operating a network, there is a lot of data and operations and monitoring that are handled on daily basis. So the question is, if the applications for the users, everyone now does banking on the smartphone, right? Everyone now order dinner on the smartphone, right? But on the back of that, why we don't have such an automated system? Again, I said before, that corresponds to the use of the application itself. It involves different parties, and for example, us as HGC, we try to always find the niche of innovations about that, but requires to bring different parties together. In the slides that you guys shared before, there was data center, then telecom, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, it's not only about data center, telecom, but there are also new aspects coming online, like cybersecurity as well, which involves another spectrum of skills that are involved in this process of delivering ultimately the experience for the users. So we welcome the ideas and the challenges that Qarbon is trying to solve by automating this kind of processes. And an outage sometimes say, oh, it lasts 5 hours, 7 hours, but when these things unfortunately occur, that it can be linked to a cooling problem, it can be linked to a network problem. It still requires the troubleshooting and who from the operation should go there and fix it. So we really need, I believe, a new wave of automation as much as we can. For certain things, we still need human monitoring on that. And the last thing is, at the same time, we also need to be aware that the cyber crimes is also on rise. For example, in Hong Kong, there is last year there's some reports from the government here that there's a lot of cyber crime coming online. So we always try to work on that direction as well, and we try to automate as much as possible on that aspect as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Marcello. So I'm conscious of time, and we do have a few questions. I'm gonna focus in on two, which I think summarize some of the others as well nicely. So the first one to both of you. So either or both of you, feel free to jump in. How do you perceive the distinctions between AI data centers in the North America region and those in Asia? So what are some of the differences in terms of AI supporting data center infrastructure, or AI enabled, let's call it, data centers in those two regions, and what are some of the differences?
Well, I think let me jump in as to what I'm seeing, at least from an AI data center perspective, is we're seeing, at least when I speak to people who are looking at and building and trying to solve for this, we're seeing larger campuses that are able to handle multiple use sets in North America. And I think a lot of that is due to availability of land from a permitting perspective, and in many cases, the availability of power in certain key locations. In Asia, I'm seeing more of a split between the two. Whereas there is a far larger constraint on power or the right type of land in the right locations with the right level of fiber and network connectivity. So, more constraints on the environment. So we're actually seeing sort of the AI requirements split in two. The latency sensitive sort of edge applications are being built in smaller AI ready locations that are closer to end customers. And then they're able to move off, or needing to move off, the more core non-latency sensitive AI applications to a far more remote location where land is cheaper and there may be better access to power, and fiber isn't as constrained. So I think Asia has a different set of dynamics than North America in this case, which then creates opportunities because now these sites need to be interconnected together from companies like Hutchison. So there's extra constraints or extra needs put on the network that need to really tie together what would be a single larger campus in North America is actually two individual deployments that may be many kilometers away from one another.
Interesting. Marcello, any view? You're someone who knows both regions very well, having recently been there, and I know you visit there a lot. But any differences in approach or current from a maybe networking the data center, even infrastructure from what you're seeing HGC? You know Asia very well, but any differences between how the approaches are playing out in both regions?
I think. Their market's completely different. In the US, it's as Robert mentioned, we have these large campuses where sometimes they sit where the land is easier to get access. But at the same time, in the US, as you guys might know, there is a bit of constraints about power and also water. So there are some states that in the US that they are putting kind of moratorium similar to the Singapore one, for example, where basically now the data center is really perceived as a utilities asset. They consume a lot of power and water as well, for the liquid cooling coming on to serve the AI industry. And in Asia is different because just the landscape is different. There are areas where there is plenty of sustainability items that will facilitate these kind of deployments, but at the same time the connectivity can be an issue as well. We serve some GPU as a service companies in Asia for larger scale deployments, and we always look at those markets where the power is still available. Is of course is like is a race, right? Because that's the challenge actually in the industry. No matter if it's US, North America, or Asia, or even Europe, right? Now it seems to be the race is mostly about whoever can get the power and the cooling technologies as well. That's the main shift for data centers, regardless Asia or US, Europe, and so on.
That's a big point at the end. Yeah, I think it's a cross-regional, a global issue now, impacting everyone. So this is the final question, and very fitting actually, because it's talking about industry metrics, and we'll from next week onwards start announcing the next podcast, and you'll see why it's so relevant. But let me ask this question, and Robert, I'll start with you again, and Marcello again, if you want to comment. This will be the last question, and we'll hopefully give people some time back before, I'm sure, which could well be their next call. So Robert, are there industry recognized metrics yet for how automated a given data center is?
That's actually an excellent question. And we've actually started looking at that. In the network space, there are some standard bodies. We'll use MEF as the one that we're working with most specifically, that has metrics as to how well and far along the journey a given company is for automation and API interconnectivity. There really isn't anything like that in the data center space yet. So when we look at the data center, we see that you can really break it down to 19 functional things you do with a data center today as a consumer of data center services. So to me, that sort of lends itself, similar to the MEF model, that we could start to look at automating all of those, and now also sort of score out how well automated an individual operator is. People like Equinix, Digital Realty, and others are fairly well along the journey, not complete, but they're further along than many others. So I do think we're going to get to the point in maybe a year or two where we are going to have sort of an ability to start measuring level of automation that people have been able to provide. We're not sort of at that point yet because there aren't any standards. It's sort of all roll your own in the market, very proprietary, similar to how really the network space was 20 years ago. If we were to turn around and look at the network space before TM Forum and MEF and other bodies really sort of laid it on down, that's where we are in the data center space. But I do think you're going to see massive changes in the next 18 months as to how people start to change and shift. And I will admit, AI is going to help to drive that because of what that's going to need and how you're going to have to be successful to sell into that space. And with those sorts of companies, a big checkbook is always an easy way to drive innovation.
As always. No, great response, Robert. And you mentioned MEF there. And please watch this space for future Q connectors. Marcello, anything you want to add to end on that point from your perspective? Any sort of industry standards? I know it's different from the telco world to a degree, but
I mean, just as Rob mentioned, there's the MEF that is trying to get these metrics right for the AI, and hopefully it's also let's say a motivation, a benchmark for everyone in the industry to move forward that direction. So I'm not sure maybe the change can happen overnight as usual, but it's how to say the Japanese ikigai, or how it's called, like when you improve day by day towards that direction,
slowly but surely.
Correct.
Surely.
Yep. Baby steps, one step at a time.
One step at a time is already enough.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to end on. I think we spoke about the AI tsunami, and we're ending with baby steps in the right direction, just to try and move the slower humans along to keep up with the AI machines as they come.
Yes.
But hopefully we can all live happily together in the new global ecosystem is the hope. Well, Robert, thank you as always for your insights and knowledge. Marcello, thank you for gracing us with your presence and kindly accepting our invitation, and very much look forward to seeing you again in person. Last was PTC in Hawaii. Hopefully many other future opportunities to meet in person. But thank you, Marcello.
Thanks for having me, and thank you. Thanks for organizing this.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marcello.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.